The old man was not afraid to die. He had spent 60 years walking toward death and grinning at it. He had stood against 101 howling berserkers with one shield brother at his back, and lived to drink to it. Death was an old sparring partner. He knew its weight, its smell, the cold honesty of it. What frightened him, alone behind a locked door while his family laughed in the hall above his head, was not the dying. It was the door that would open the moment he finally did, because he knew exactly what was waiting on the other side of it, and it was not the place he had spent his whole life earning. Let the fire in the hall above him grow small and far away. Let the laughter blur into something warm and wordless. Down here, in the low light, there is only an old man with steady hands gone unsteady, reading the same passage in the same book for the 100th time, looking for a way out of a fate he agreed to long before he understood what it cost. His name is Kodlak Whitemane, and he is the most respected warrior in Skyrim, and he is hiding from every person who loves him. There is a thing sitting at the center of this story that I want to hold until we have earned it. When it arrives, it will not add to what you know. It will change what all of it meant. For now, just hold one question close, the way he held that book. Why would the bravest man in the land be terrified of his own heaven? Go up the stairs first, into the noise, into the warmth, because to understand what the old man lost, you have to first see what he had. The mead hall is called Jorvaska, and it is the oldest building in Whiterun. The city did not build the hall. The hall came first, alone on the hill beside an ancient forge, and the whole city grew up around it over the centuries like moss around a stone. Look up at the roof. It curves. It curves because it is the hull of a ship turned upside down. That is not decoration. That is the truth of the place. Long ago, when a hard people crossed a freezing sea from a dying land in the far north, they came in longships, and one of those ships was called Jorvaska, and when its crew finally found a place to stop running, they pulled the boat ashore, turned it over, and lived beneath it. The thing that had carried them across the water became the roof they slept under. The vessel of their flight became the walls of their home. There is something in that worth sitting with. These were people who had lost a homeland, and the first thing they did when they found a new one was take the very thing that had carried them away from everything they'd lost and make it the place they belonged. That has always been what this hall is for. It is a home for people who lost their first one. The warriors who live here now call themselves the Companions, and they are the last living thread of a legend. They trace their blood all the way back to 500 warriors who followed a single grieving man home across that sea to take back a land that had been stolen from them in a single night of slaughter. The man's name was Ysgramor. His axe was called Storm's Tears. And the companions who fill this hall today, drinking and arguing and sharpening blades by the fire, are what remains of his 500, thinned by the centuries down to a single mead hall on a single hill. They take coin to fight, yes, but that was never the heart of it. Ask any of them who is in charge, and they will tell you honestly that no one is. They have had no true leader since Ysgramor himself. What they have instead is a harbinger, not a master, not a king, a counselor. One voice more respected than the rest, whose only real power is that people listen. And the thing that holds them together is older and simpler than any of that. It is the oldest reason people ever bind themselves to one another. Almost every warrior under that overturned hull came to it the same way Kodlak did. They lost a family. And then they found this one. Listen to the noise of the hall for a moment, really listen, and you start to hear it differently. It isn't only the bragging of fighters, it is the specific, defended joy of people who once had nothing and now have a place at a long table and a roof made from an old ship and a circle of faces that will come for them if they fall. That is the warmth at the center of this whole story. Hold on to it, because every single thing that goes wrong from here grows out of that warmth. Out of people loving each other exactly that much. The old man downstairs built nothing in this hall that mattered more than that, and it is the thing he can no longer share in. Kodlak Whitemane was not born to this family. He earned his way into it the way most of them did, by losing everything else first. He was little more than a boy when his own family died. He doesn't say how. In any of the records the world keeps of him. He only says that afterward he wandered the length of the land with a sword and an axe and the fire of a grown man already burning in a child's chest. He was working as a hired blade far to the south, in the deserts of Hammerfell, when an old harbinger named Askar found him and recognized something. Askar brought him home to the overturned ship, and the companions, the way Kodlak would say it ever after, became the family he had lost, given back to him a second time. He led them for 20 years, not by command, they don't take commands, but by being the kind of man whose word you wanted to follow. He was a philosopher as much as a warrior, prone to turning a hard question over and over in the firelight. The difference, he once said, between a noble band of warriors and a ragged pack of killers is as thin as the edge of a blade. He spent his life trying to keep his family on the right side of it, and now he was old, and he was sick, and his body was failing him in a way no enemy ever had. So he locked the door. He pulled out the old documents, and night after night, while the hall above him roared with the warmth he had spent his life protecting, he read. Here is the thing most people would assume, and the thing that is quietly, terribly wrong. They would assume he was looking for a cure for the sickness in his body. He wasn't. He had made his peace with dying. A Nord warrior is supposed to want a good death. A death in battle. A death with honor. The kind of death that opens the doors of paradise. Kodlak had wanted that his whole life. What he was searching those brittle pages for was something else. He was looking for a way to make sure that when the good death finally came, it would take him to the right place. Because somewhere along the way, this family of his, the one that saved him, the one he loved more than his own life, had done something to him, something that would not let him go home when he died. And the worst part, the part that kept him down there in the dark and not up there in the light, was this. He could not tell a single one of them what he had finally understood. Not yet. Some of them would not believe him. Some of them would not want to. It is too much, he wrote, to burden another with. So he carried it alone. The most surrounded man in Skyrim, carrying the heaviest thing he had ever carried, in a locked room, in silence, a few feet beneath the laughter of everyone he had ever loved. To understand what was done to him, you have to meet the people who would either help him undo it or refuse to. There is an inner circle within the companions, not a rank exactly, a secret kept inside a family. They call it simply the circle, and every member of it shares something that the warriors drinking in the hall above do not know they carry. There are 5 of them around Kodlak in his final year, and to understand the fracture running through them, you have to understand that they do not all want the same thing, and that the thing dividing them is the thing they have in common. There are the twins first, Vilkas and Farkas, 2 brothers raised inside this hall, as close as 2 people can be. Vilkas is the sharper one, quick to anger, quick to suspicion, a thinker who broods. Farkas is the gentler giant, slower to speak, the kind of man who, when grief comes, says only that he needs to go find his brother. They are the heart of the next generation, and even they are not sure where they stand on the question that is tearing quietly at their family. Then there is Skjor, old, scarred, a veteran's veteran, a man others looked at and assumed could not be killed. And there is Ayla. They call her the Huntress, and the name is not a flourish. She is the fiercest of all of them, a woman who lets her actions speak, who goes out into the dark of the wilds at night and runs down prey under the moon. What the world implies, though it never quite says it outright, is that Skjor and Ayla are more than shield siblings. That the two who most loved the wildness in their blood loved it together. And that is the fault line, because the thing all five of them share, the secret gift passed into the circle, Skjor and Ayla call a blessing, the greatest gift a warrior could be given. They would not trade it for anything, least of all some pale promise of a quiet afterlife. Kodlak calls it a curse. So, increasingly, does Vilkas. Same blood, same gift, two of them holding it like a treasure, two of them holding it like a wound, and the twins caught in the middle, watching the father of their family slowly come apart over a question none of them can say out loud in the hall upstairs. You can feel, can't you, how this ends badly? Not because anyone here is wicked. There is no villain in this room. Skjor is not cruel. Ayla is not evil. They simply love the thing that is destroying them, and they cannot understand why their dying harbinger wants so desperately to be rid of it. That is the most painful kind of family argument there is. The kind where everyone is right from where they're standing. The kind where love is exactly the problem. So what is it? What is this gift that one warrior guards like a child and another reads old books in the dark to escape? To answer that, we have to leave this hall. We have to go back, centuries back, before Kodlak, before the twins, before any of them, to the moment the curse first walked through the door, and to the name no companion likes to say. For most of its long history, the family in the overturned ship was exactly what it claimed to be. A line of warriors, mortal men and women who lived hard, fought well, and died. And when they died, they went home. This is the Nord belief, old as the cold itself. A true warrior who dies with honor passes into Sovngarde, a vast misty hall beyond the world, where the mead never runs dry, and the dead who earned their place feast and fight and wait together forever. It is not just an afterlife. To a Nord, it is home. It is where the ancestors are. It is where the people you loved have gone ahead of you, and where one day you will see them again. Imagine the line of harbingers stretching back through the centuries like a chain of fires lit one from the next. Ysgramor first, then the ones who followed him, each leading the family in their turn, each dying, each ascending to that golden hall to take their place among the honored dead. A clean chain, fire to fire to fire, every one of them reaching home. Until one of them didn't. His name was Terfig. He was the harbinger, generations ago, and he is the place where the chain breaks. He is the one who let something in. Here is what happened, as far as the world will tell it. There was a coven of witches, the Glenmoril wired, old practitioners of a wild and ancient kind of power, deep in their bones with the land and with the dark things that listen at its edges. And the darkest thing they listened to was a Daedric Prince, one of the great inhuman powers that rule the realms beyond the world. The Prince of the Hunt, Hircine. He is the father of beastmen, the lord of the chase. Of all the great dark princes, he is, strangely, among the least cruel. He does not scheme to end the world, does not hunger to enslave every soul. He wants one thing, purely and endlessly: the hunt, the chase, the single perfect moment before the predator reaches the prey. There is no retribution in the hunt, he has said, not vengeance, just the living, breathing pursuit forever. And the witches who served him went to Terfig with an offer. "Hunt in the name of our Lord," they said. "Take his power into your blood, and you will be stronger than any warrior who ever lived." The power was real. That part was never a lie. What they offered was the strength of the beast itself, to become something vast and fanged and unstoppable under the moon. The lie was smaller than that. The lie was one word. They let Terfig believe it would be temporary. It was not. Sit with how ordinary that betrayal is. Not a curse screamed in malice. Not a bargain signed in blood and full understanding. Just a man who wanted to make his family stronger, agreeing to something he was told he could put down later, and discovering too late that it had no later, that what he had taken into his blood would stay there. And worse, far worse, that it would not stay in his blood alone. Because the thing they had given him was the kind of thing you pass on. That is the crack in the surface. That is the first fault line under the warm and noble house. One harbinger, centuries ago, wanting only to protect the people he loved, opened a door he was told he could close, and every companion since has lived in the draught of it. But I've told you the version Terfig lived. There is another version, hidden inside this same story, and it is the thing I asked you to hold at the very beginning. We are almost there. First, you have to see exactly what gets passed down, and how. Beside the overturned ship stands the forge. It is called the Sky Forge, and it is older than the city, older than the companions, older than men in this land at all. The witches and elves who came before feared it. Something about it runs on a magic almost as old as the world, some leftover scrap, the old stories say, of the gods' first attempt to make a paradise before everything broke. The finest steel in all the land is born here. That is why the ship was beached at this exact spot, not for the view, for the fire. And beneath the Sky Forge, hidden, sealed to all but a chosen few, there is a smaller chamber, a cave of old stone, the Underforge. This is where the gift is given. Picture it, night. The chosen one is brought down into the dark, into a low stone room with a single basin at its center, dry and waiting. And there, in the shadows, stands one of the circle, already changed, already in the great fanged shape of the beast, enormous and patient and watching. A forebear, they call this one, the one whose blood you will take. And then it is done, the only way it can be done. The forebear's wrist is opened, and the dark blood runs down into the basin until it fills, and the chosen one bends and drinks. I want you to notice how this is given. Not seized, not forced, not poured into a sleeping victim or tricked into a cup of wine. It is offered openly in a sacred dark place, from one who already carries it to one who has been judged worthy to carry it too. It is the most intimate thing these warriors do for one another. To make someone your blood, to welcome them, finally and fully, into the innermost family. The gift is given as an act of love. Remember that. Of everything in this story, remember that. And what does the chosen one wake as? A werewolf. The beast blood is theirs now. Under the moon, or whenever the will takes them, they can become the great wolf. Faster, stronger, more terrible than any mortal thing. Claws that open armor like cloth. A body that heals as fast as it's wounded. In the hour of the hunt, it is something close to ecstasy. Ayla would tell you there is nothing else like it in all the world. To run, to be that strong, to feel that alive. This is the blessing Skjor guards, and you can understand it, can't you? If someone offered you the power of a god in the body of a beast, given to you by the people you love most, in a ceremony that meant you belong to us now, forever, would you really have the wisdom to ask what it costs? Because it does cost. And here is the price. The one Kodlak finally understood in his locked room. When a Nord dies with honor, his soul goes home to Sovngarde. But the soul of a werewolf does not. The soul of a werewolf belongs to Hircine. And when the beast-blooded die, they are not carried to the golden hall of their ancestors. They are taken to his realm, the hunting grounds, to run and kill and be killed and run again, in an endless wild forever, in the shape of the beast, beside the lord of the hunt, forever, apart from everyone who went home the ordinary way, apart from the ancestors, apart from the wife, the brother, the child who died before you and reached Sovngarde and is waiting there at the long table for a face that will now never come. That is what was passed hand to hand in the dark beneath the forge. Not just power, a locked door at the end of life, given with love. And it cannot be taken back by anyone who has already received it. That is the curse on the companions. A whole brotherhood, generation after generation, quietly trading away the only afterlife where they could all be together again. And you would think, wouldn't you, that the tragedy of it is that they never knew. In his last year, the sickness in Kodlak's body brought him dreams. And in the dreams, the truth he had been chasing in those old books finally showed itself whole. He saw the line of harbingers, the whole chain of them, stretching back to the beginning. He watched each one come to the end of his life and rise toward the misty horizon of Sovngarde, toward Great Zun who guards the way, toward home. One after another, climbing toward the golden light, until the chain reached Terfig, and Kodlak watched Terfig try to climb toward that same horizon, try to go home like all the ones before him. And before he could even reach the guardian of the gate, a great wolf came out of the mist and seized him and dragged him down and away into the wild dark of the hunting grounds, where Hircine was waiting with open arms and a welcoming laugh. Dragged, against his will. Terfig did not choose the wolf. The wolf took him. So far, this is the story exactly as you have understood it. A man deceived. A man stolen from his own heaven by a power he didn't fully understand. A victim. And then Kodlak's dream went on. He watched the next harbinger come to the end of life. And this one did not climb toward Sovngarde and get dragged away. This one turned. This one looked at the golden horizon and looked at the wild dark and walked on his own 2 feet away from home and into the hunting grounds of his own accord. And then the next did the same. And the next. And the next. Every harbinger after Terfig, Kodlak realized, watching them in his sleep, every single one, turned away from Sovngarde and chose the wolf. There it is. The thing I asked you to hold since the very first words. It was a deception only once. Terfig was tricked. Terfig was dragged. But every companion who came after him knew. They saw what the gift was. They knew the price was their own eternity, their own home, their own reunion with everyone they'd ever lost. They knew the cup of blood in the Underforge brought them the wild dark instead of the golden hall. And they drank anyway. And when death came, they walked into Hircine's arms on purpose. Not a curse caught by accident. A choice, made again, and again, and again. By people who loved each other in a dark room under a forge for hundreds of years. The warmth you saw at the start, the family of orphans, the home built from a ship, the blood given as an act of love. None of it was a lie. It was all true. It was truer than you knew. Because they did not stumble into damnation. They chose to be damned together rather than be saved apart. They looked at paradise, the place where the dead they loved were waiting, and they decided that an eternity running beside their living brothers in the wild was worth more than a quiet seat at the ancestors' table. It is the most human thing in this entire story, and it is the most terrible. That is why Kodlak could not say it aloud in the hall, because to break the chain, to choose Sovngarde, was to choose, in a way, to leave them. To say, I love you, and I will not follow you into the dark. I am going home, and you are not coming with me. In the dream, at the very end, Kodlak saw himself reach the horizon. And for the first time in the whole long line, he saw a choice. Sovngarde on one side, the wolf on the other. And he was not alone. At his side stood a stranger he had never met. Someone who would come into his life when the moment was right. And together, Kodlak and this stranger, they turned to face the great wolf with weapons drawn. He did not yet know who the stranger was. He only knew, somehow, that they were coming. That when the end came, he would not have to face the wolf by himself. It appears, he wrote in his own hand, that I have a choice. He had spent his whole life thinking the hard part was dying well. He was only now learning that the hard part was choosing where to go, and who to leave behind to do it. The stranger came. We'll leave them mostly out of the telling, because this was never their story. It was Kodlak's, and his family's. But know that one day a newcomer walked into the overturned ship looking for a place to belong, the way they all had, and the old man saw them and felt something he could not explain, as though he had met them somewhere before. But the family's enemies were closing in, and they did not wait for old men to finish their searching. There are hunters in Skyrim who know what the companions are. They are called the Silver Hand, and they exist for one purpose: to kill werewolves. They carry silver because silver is the one thing the beast blood cannot heal around. They had learned the circle's secret, and they had decided to end it. Skjor went first. He was the one they all thought could not die. The invincible one. He went out alone against a Silver Hand stronghold. Too proud, maybe, or too sure, or maybe just unwilling to wait. And he did not come back. Ayla found him. The fierce huntress, the one who loved the wild blood more than any of them, knelt over the body of the man she had run beside under 100 moons, and what broke in her then she carried as a cold and total need for revenge. And here is the part almost no one lets themselves say. Skjor was a believer. To Skjor, the hunting grounds were never a punishment. They were paradise, the greatest hunt, with no end, forever. When that old warrior fell, his soul went exactly where he had always wanted it to go, out of the world and into the wild dark, to run beside the Lord of the Hunt for all of time. So was it a tragedy? It depends entirely on who you ask. To Kodlak, Skjor was lost, pulled away from home into an eternity of running. To Skjor himself, it was the reward he'd earned. Two people, looking at the same fate, one seeing damnation and one seeing heaven. That is the cruelest thing about this whole curse. It is not even agreed upon by the people it claims. The cage is paradise, if you love the wild enough, and there is no one left to tell you which of them was right. The grief in the hall was raw. Vilkas said it plainly. One of their great fires had gone out. Farkas said only that he needed to find his brother. The family had been bleeding quietly for centuries over a question of the soul. Now it was bleeding the ordinary way too. And then the Silver Hand did the thing that broke everything open. They came for the hall itself. They came into the overturned ship, the home built from the boat that carried the orphans, the oldest safe place these people had, and they killed the old man. They killed Kodlak. It happened in the one place he should have been safe, surrounded by the family he had spent his life protecting. The strange thing, the thing the world never quite explains, is that only he fell that night. The others were shaken, scratched, but they lived. Only the Harbinger. Only the old man who had finally, secretly, decided he wanted to go home. He died before he could be cured. Which meant, by everything we have learned, that the wolf was already coming for him. The great beast in the mist, the one that had dragged Terfig down. Kodlak's body was gone, and his soul was bound for the hunting grounds, and the choice he had seen in his dream, the choice he had finally found the courage to make, was about to be taken from him. Unless someone broke the chain for him, unless the stranger from his dream did the thing he could no longer do himself. The Silver Hand took something else that night, when they killed him. They took the broken pieces of Ysgramor's own axe, the sacred relic of the whole family. Storm's tears, shattered and scattered, the last thread connecting them to the very beginning. To free the old man's soul, the family would have to get all of it back. The axe, the witches' heads, and the courage to do the one thing none of them had ever done. They would have to go to the tomb of Ysgramor himself. Before we follow them into that tomb, hold one more thing beside the companion's choice, because it was never the only curse of its kind. What was done to them is something the great dark princes do again and again, and the pattern makes their choice ache all the more. Far older than Terfig, in the first dark age of the world, there was a woman, a priestess, a devout follower of the god of life and death, and another of the great princes, the cruelest one, the prince of domination who hungers to own souls, chose her. What he did to her was monstrous, and when he was finished, he pressed a single drop of his blood to her brow and left her to die. She did die, and as her funeral pyre still burned, she rose from it as something else. The first of her kind, a pure blood vampire, bound to him forever. They called what she became a daughter of his cold, dark realm. And she would not be the last. Hold the two stories side by side. A beast curse passed in love beneath a forge. A blood curse pressed onto a dying woman's brow in hatred. They could not be more different in spirit. One given as the deepest gift, one taken as the deepest cruelty. And yet they end in the same place. A mortal soul made into something powerful and owned. A door that opens at death onto a prince's realm instead of home. A gift, in every case, that is also a cage, because the great princes do not give. They acquire. The strength is real. The freedom is the lie. Whether it comes wrapped in love or in violence, the bargain underneath is always the same. Your power now, your eternity always. And once it is in your blood, it does not come out on its own. Ever. There was a man named Sinding who stole a relic of Hircine himself, the Ring of the Hunt, hoping it would let him master the beast blood and choose when the change came. The Lord of the Hunt does not take kindly to being robbed. He cursed the ring, and the change began seizing Sinding without warning. And one of those times came while a little girl stood in front of him. She never had a chance. A man who only wanted to control the gift he'd been given. A gift that ate a child instead. The power is always real. The control is always the lie. So when the companions finally walked into the tomb of their founder to try to undo it, to cut the wolf out of one soul before the wild dark could take it, understand what they were really trying to do. They were trying to do the one thing the dark princes never allow. They were trying to give a gift back. The tomb of Ysgramor sits far to the north, in the cold where the family first came ashore. It is the resting place of the very first of them, the grieving man who started it all. No companion sets foot there lightly. To go there is to go all the way back to the beginning. And there is a flame inside it. The flame of the Harbinger, an old fire that has burned in some sense. For all of them, the fire that the dead Harbingers gather around in the unseen places between the worlds. There is one way, and only one, to cut the wolf out of a soul. It was the thing Kodlak had finally found in his old books. You need the head of one of the Glenmoril witches, the same coven that gave the curse in the first place, their power held in their severed heads even in death. You bring that head to the flame of the Harbinger, and you cast it into the fire. And when you do, the wolf comes out. Not gently. The beast spirit, the thing that has lived in the blood, the thing that grants the strength and claims the soul, is torn loose from the person and made to stand on its own. A great spectral wolf separated from its host at last. And then you have to do the hardest part. You have to kill it. You have to look at the source of all that power, all that belonging, the thing your family gave you in love, the thing that made you stronger than you ever dreamed. And you have to put a blade through it. You have to choose to be weak again. You have to choose to be mortal and ordinary and going home. His family carried the witch's head into the deep of the tomb, to the flame, for him. Because Kodlak was already dead, his soul already slipping toward the hunting grounds. They were doing for his ghost what he could no longer do for himself. And there, by the fire, they found him. The old man's spirit, warming his hands at the flame of the Harbinger, exactly as he had dreamed he would. Around him, unseen, the ghosts of every Harbinger before him, the whole broken chain, the ones who had chosen the wolf, gathered close. They cast the head into the flame, and Kodlak's wolf rose up out of him, and turned and attacked. Even at the very end, the gift did not want to be given back. It fought to keep him. It fought to drag him into the dark with all the others. They killed it, and the old man stood there, in the firelight, a beast lighter, and for the first time in his death, he was free to choose. Land in this for a moment. This is the thing he searched for in the dark for years, the thing he carried alone because it was too heavy to ask anyone to carry with him. The stranger from his dream had come, exactly as he'd foreseen, and stood at his side. And together they had faced the great wolf and won. The choice he had been promised was finally, truly his. He chose home. The horizon opened. The mist, the golden light, great Tsun on the far edge of it, beckoning him in at last. Kodlak Whitemane turned away from the wild dark that had claimed every Harbinger before him for centuries. and he walked on his own 2 feet the other way. Toward the Hircine, long table, toward the ancestors, toward the family that had gone ahead and waited. And this is the weight you carry out of the tomb. He was one soul, freed out of centuries. Behind him, in the hunting grounds, every harbinger who came before him is still there, still running. Terfig, who was dragged. And all the ones who chose it, who would not have left even if they could. They are still in the wild dark, and no one has come for them. Kodlak knew this. Even in his peace, he could not quite let it go. He dreamed of one more thing. A great gathering of the honored dead, the heroes of Sovngarde marching out of the Golden Hall and into the hunting grounds to tear his lost brothers free from Hircine's grasp and bring them home at last. He called it the harrowing. It never came. It may not even be possible. The world does not say. So they are still there. The whole long chain of them, running under a wild sky in the shape of the beast. Forever. The ones who loved each other so much, they chose the dark together rather than the light alone. And one old man who loved them just as much and went home without them. So come back one last time to the locked room beneath the hall. The old man, alone, by the small candle, reading the same page for the 100th time while his family laughs overhead. Afraid, not of dying, never of dying, but of the door that would open the moment he did. You know now what was behind that door. The great wolf in the mist. The wild dark. An eternity of running, apart from everyone who ever went home ahead of him. He had every reason to be afraid. The chain had not broken in centuries. No harbinger had walked the other way since the beginning of the curse. But the door opened, in the end, onto a horizon instead of a hunt. Not because the dark let him go. It never lets go. But because someone walked into his life just as he'd dreamed, and did for him the one thing he could not do alone. Because a family that had spent centuries handing one another the same beautiful, terrible gift finally handed one of its own something else instead. A way out. A way home. Here is the quiet, honest thing underneath all of it. The blood that made them a family in life was the same blood that would keep them apart in death. And most of them looked at that, clear-eyed, and chose each other anyway. That is not stupidity. That is not even tragedy exactly. It is the oldest love there is, the kind that would rather be lost together than saved alone. And you have felt some smaller, safer version of it. The friend you'd follow somewhere you shouldn't go, just to not go alone. The family whose company you'd choose over almost anything that was supposedly good for you. The pull, when the people you love are headed into the dark, to simply go with them, because being apart from them sounds worse than whatever waits in the dark. The companions made that choice with their eternity. We make smaller versions of it every day, and it is worth asking yourself, gently, in the quiet before sleep, which doors have you walked through, just to not walk through them alone? And would you, even now, choose any differently? If you've stayed with me this far into the dark, and you'd like to keep these old fires lit, there are more of these stories waiting, and following along is the simplest way to find your way back to them. That's all. One small thing, and then we'll let the world go quiet. Now. The candle in the locked room has burned low. Upstairs, the laughter has finally softened into the slow breathing of a hall full of warriors asleep. And far away, beyond the world, past a misty horizon, an old man sits at a long table he was afraid he would never reach. Among faces he lost a lifetime ago, with a cup that does not run dry, and a chair, perhaps, left empty beside him, kept warm and waiting, the way someone always kept a place for him.